Hi, I'm John Slattery and you're very welcome along to Carfile. Now, if you've been watching the programme since the beginning of the series, well then you know each week we take 3 cars from a different class and test them for practicality, performance, styling and of course value for money. And this week, well, it's time to put a bit of fire in the belly. Sounded very Irish. We have 3 of the smaller hot hatches on the market in the shape of the Mini Cooper S, the MG ZR160 and the Renault Clio 172 Cup. And of course, later on in the series, we'll be looking at the larger hot hatches on the market. Plus, of course, today, Brendan Coogan will be here, as always, with his alternative test.
That's right, folks. Provided I can get my oversized Mancunian frame behind the wheel, I'll be putting one of the smallest hot hatches on the market, the Volkswagen Lupo GTI, through its paces. Wish me luck.
That I will, Brendan. Good luck. Now, before we get down to the testing of our 3 cars, let's see what they have to offer.
In the Renault camp, we have the Clio 172 Cup, derived from their single-make racing series. It has 172 horsepower as the regular Clio 172, but with revised suspension and steering and also a reduced overall weight, thanks to the dumping of the air conditioning, side airbags and xenon headlamps. That means it's quicker off the mark, getting to 60 in 6.8 seconds. It's also not as heavy on the wallet, as the Cup is actually £2,000 less than the regular Clio 172. From MG, we have the baby of the range, the ZR VVC. First, throw away the How to Make Over a Car in a Subtle Way handbook. Then take one Rover 25 lower and stiffen the suspension, quicken the steering and beef up the brakes, fit larger wheels and sporty seats, add an engine from the MG TF and finally bolt on an outrageous body kit and voila! You have the MG ZS. It doesn't look subtle and neither do its stats, with 60 coming up in 7.4 seconds. And last, but by no means least, the Mini Cooper S. This is a raucous version of the cutesy Mini 1. Like our other cars, it has stiffer suspension compared to its tamer brothers. It gets bigger alloys, fabulous centre exit tailpipes, and under the bonnet, the 1.6 engine gains a supercharger which ups the power from 115 to 163 horsepower. That in turn means your 0 to 60 time drops to just 7.4 seconds.
On with our scrutineering and the first aspect of a car that grabs your attention: exterior styling. And seeing as we're looking for a car for the boy or girl racer in you, what better one to start with than the loudest of them all? It is of course the MG. Now, just like the ZTT we featured a couple of weeks ago, this will be a love or hate relationship with this car. To be honest, I know an awful lot of people and they absolutely detest him. Me, I actually quite like it, even more so than the ZTT in state. And that's mainly because of the aggressive air intake, the twin headlamps, and the acres of wire mesh are a lot more in keeping with a Leary pocket rocket than they are with an estate car. Now, although it's obviously a Rover 25 shell with an awful lot of pieces stuck onto it, it has to be said the finish is top class. And they look an awful lot better in the flesh than they do in magazines. Build quality is also superb and you won't have problems like your tail spoiler falling off after a couple of years. Now, the high-spec ZRs come with these 17-inch wheels, shod with these ultra-low profile tyres. And it has to be said that they are the finishing touch that makes this car look like a real mean-looking machine.
You'd be hard-pressed to find someone who has a bad word to say about the Mini. And the thousands of Europeans and Americans who are crying out for them can't be wrong. Despite the Mini gaining a bit of muscle in its S trim, it's still as attractive and eye-catching as ever. Granted, it may well be too tame and, dare I say it, a little girly for the die-hard boy racers out there. But not every performance car needs to have whale tail spoilers and 5-inch tailpipes stuck on it. So, how does the French flair of the Clio stand in this battle for style? Well, like the Mini, the Clio Cup's styling is more of a subtle affair compared to the loud and proud MG. Whilst the overall effect is clean and well put together, there isn't much here to give you a sense of the Clio's awesome drive. The Clio V6 is more like it, with its harsh side skirts and side air vents, whereas this is very tame to look at. Now, whilst that will suit those people out there who like stealthy performance, for me, I like the idea of having something eye-catching. Granted, you won't see too many of these Cup Edition Clios on the road, but if you are spotted in one, passers-by may think you are driving an entry-level £7,000 Clio. Well, if all 3 were lined up side by side, I'd be drawn to the MG first. It's purposeful, it's mean, and its looks really make you want to get in and drive. And though the Mini is a lovely thing to look at, it's not really aggressive enough for my liking. And the Renault, well, unless I'd read the fabulous technical specifications for the Clio Cup, there's nothing in the looks that would tempt me into the driver's seat.
Now it's time for the interior of our 3 hot hatches. So which ones will have you wooing your friends, impressing your boy or girlfriend, or making you wish you'd bought a completely different car? Let's find out. Now, I'm not going to beat around the bush with the Mini. It's one of the most inspired and creative interiors that I've seen. It's a work of art, the way they've combined modern looking material with retro styling, and it works. Okay, so some of the buttons are a bit fiddly, but I mean, who cares when it looks this good? Now, the instrument panel on the S is slightly different to your regular Mini. The big dinner plate speedo has been replaced by this regular analog unit. It's straight in front of the driver and beside the rev counter, and it's so you can concentrate on your driving without moving your eye line. The place where the big dinner plate speedo was is now being used for your GP navigation unit and other technical information. Now, the seating position in the S is the same as your regular Mini, but in this version you've got a bit more support, which you will need for when you're throwing this in and out of the bends, and trust me, you will do an awful lot of that. I have to say, it's an incredibly impressive interior, and even though there isn't a BMW badge to be seen, there is no doubt that the BMW blood is running through this car's pipes. So, from one classic motoring name to another, it's the MG.
Well, the badge may be a classic, but this interior certainly isn't. It's straight out of the Rover 25, but with some metal effects on the dashboard, none of which is particularly tasteful. In fact, you get the feeling that the inside of this MG is a bit of an afterthought, especially when the exterior is so good. On a more positive note, the ZR seats do hold you in place quite well, but the awkward driving position and that poor interior all add up to a pretty poor place to spend time. If only it were a bit more like its bigger brother, the MG ZTT. On the equipment front, we can't really criticise the Clio Cup for being minimal, as it is advertised as a special, lightweight edition Clio, so air conditioning is left off, as is a sunroof, ABS and side airbags. However, leaving airbags out of a sporting edition car can't be the wisest decision ever. The driving position on the Cup is okay, and the steering wheel and seat do adjust for height, so 6-footers should be able to get comfortably behind the wheel, and a 6'2" I do. Overall, this is a good effort from Renault. It has enough sporting touches to make you feel like you are driving something special, yet it doesn't feel tacky and fragile like the MG. So it's no surprise that the Mini gets the top marks for style here. It's fabulous, simple as that. Whilst the Renault can touch the Mini for wow factor when you were talking about the interior. It is solid and those seats feel great, and the MG, well, if you're 17 and have just passed your test, you may like it, but for anyone with an inkling of style and quality, you will hate it.
Now it's time for the practicality of our 3 hot hatches. I'll tell you the jacket's off because this is where we get down to real business. You've wooed your friends and family with the exterior of your hot hatch, but can you fit them all in and take them for a drive? Well, first up, it's the Renault Clio, and straight away in here, there's a nice airy feel to it. The dash is well laid out. I don't like the radio, and there's plenty of places to put newspapers and your mobile phones, and even a couple of cups of coffee. In the back, well, I can tell you one thing, it's a bit of a squeeze to get in, as you can see, and the actual lever to pull the seat forward can get a bit sticky. But once in, I'm surprised at the amount of headroom you have, even though you've got a sloping roof in the back. And the amount of legroom is quite good, unless you've got a couple of tall passengers in the front, and then it becomes quite minimal. In the boot, well, this is where I was quite surprised. The Clio fares very well in here. As you'll see when I open this, there's quite a bit of room, and Renault have been very, very careful to ensure that the new rear suspension design doesn't intrude in the overall luggage space. And if this isn't enough room for you, well, you can push the back seat down like so, and you can pretty much fit anything in there, including a surfboard.
Moving on to the MG. Now, this is actually the longest of our 3 cars today, and once inside it does feel more airy and provides great visibility. At last, something positive to say about the inside. There's also quite a lot of space up front for storage. In the back, again, the MG feels most spacious, with excellent head and leg room for tall passengers. Around in the boot, again, it has the largest luggage area of the 3 cars, but because of the fairly narrow opening, it's not as easy to take advantage of this space as it is in the Clio. Also, the rear suspension towers do intrude into the area quite significantly, so you may need to do a bit of planning when you're packing a large amount of kit. And last but not least, it's the Mini. Well, be prepared for a shock here, because the lack of practicality is the one major flaw with this car. Up front, there is good head and leg room, even for drivers well over 6 foot. And as we've seen, the cabin is well thought out and has some nice storage touches. However, in the back, there is hardly any room for passengers, full stop. Adult or otherwise, any legroom that might have been available will be swallowed up with the front seats. Overall then, it's the MG that gets the highest marks here. Although the boot opening is not the best design, the car is the most spacious of our three and will be the most comfortable for 4 passengers on a long journey. The Clio is next, as you can carry 4 passengers and there is a reasonable amount of storage space. But down in the dungeons for practicality is the Mini. For 2 people it's adequate, but for any more you will either have to tie them to the roof or make them get the bus.
So already we've had a few surprises from our 3 cars, and it's now time for another one as we join Brendan to see, did he get behind the wheel of the VW Lupo GTI?
Size matters. Anyone tells you that it doesn't is lying and probably very small. School children don't run around the playground singing, "My dad's smaller than your dad," and no man ever stood by the bedside saying, "Hey, take a look at me, I'm tiny." I think you know what I'm talking about. Volkswagen's Lupo is a great example of something very small trying to convince you that it's a lot bigger, and for me it's very persuasive. And as an alternative to those filthy hot hatches you've just seen, the Lupo, well, that's the kind of car you could take home to meet your mum. For a start, the exterior styling is cutesy rather than brash. It lacks some of the rawness of the other cars, but its low down squat position on the road gives some clue as to its power. Inside, well, it's a whole lot more refined than any other car in the city car class. Normally you would expect the layout to be a bit basic and even a bit feminine. Not so in the Lupo. This is altogether better and more stylish. You've got aluminium effect around the dials inside, and this sumptuous black leather is a little dull, but comfortable and practical, and, well, quite expensive too. Inside, space is nothing short of amazing. I'm always banging on about how big I am and how small cars are. That's because I struggle to drive many cars. In this Lupo, it simply isn't a problem. The seats are comfortable, big, there's lots of space for you and your front passenger. However, the back is positively minute, with no room for even the smallest children. And as for the weekly shop, well, you better buy small packages, no super-sized cereals here, strictly 6 packs of toilet roll, because if you're doing more than a bit of shopping, 3-4 bags, the boot is full. Like any cute lion cub that looks all cuddly, this cat will actually bite your legs off if you get too close, and that's because it's a GTI. Any VW that carries that badge had better be able to perform. Now this is a lightweight version of the Lupo, and it's got a fantastic 1.6 litre 4-cylinder 16 valve engine, which generates a more than adequate 125 brake horsepower. It'll get you from 0 to 60 in about 8.3 seconds and on to an incredible 127 miles per hour. Remember, this is a city car. Now, as you may or may not be aware, the VW Lupo is virtually identical to the Seat Arosa. So why pay those extra pounds, and they are quite a few, for what is essentially the same car? Well, I've not heard very many decent arguments, other than to say you will get a hefty part of that money back when it comes to resale, because there are very few things as reliable in life as a VW, but one thing that is the resale values. Of course, what you are paying for is the build quality. And on this, like all VWs, it is very, very good. It's as solid as a Roy Keane tackle. That's why those residual values will be so high. I drive a second-hand VW, and after a few years, 100 or so thousand miles, it doesn't leak. All the switches work. It doesn't use an ounce of oil. And as for rust, modern VWs don't rust, even in Manchester.
He's a fair man for one man, is our Brendan, and he will be back with another alternative test next week. Well, that's nearly it for part 1 of Car File for this week, but make sure you join us after the break for the all-important road test. Yes, I'll be having a lot of fun in the Clio, the Mini and the MG. Make sure you don't miss it. Hi and welcome back to Car File. With this week, we're trying to put a bit of fire in your belly. We've got 3 of the smaller hot hatches on the market: the Mini Cooper S, the Renault Clio Cup and the MG ZR. They've all got over 155 brake horsepower and will all get you to 60 in or around the 7-second mark. Now, if that doesn't put a bit of fire in you somewhere, I don't know what will. You know, somehow I don't think this is going to be the dullest afternoon I've spent driving cars. Now, so far in the series, I've been driving kind of large cars, but this is so fast. And the fact it's small makes it seem even faster still. It's a superb drive. I've had so much fun driving it. It really does feel like I'm ripping the road up as I'm going along. Now it's actually the fastest of the 3 cars that we've tested today. It'll get you to 60 in 6.8 seconds, which is very impressive. And there's a lovely little feature on the dash. It's actually called a shift light, and it basically tells you the optimum time to change gear. You'll find it in all the rally cars. It's a lovely little sporty touch. Now this car has a high performance chassis. It's like driving a racing car. So you really do have to concentrate when you're driving it, because if you go into a bend and don't concentrate, you can find yourself out of shape very quickly. If you treat it like a normal saloon car, well, you could run into a bit of trouble. Saying that though, it's exactly what you want from a hot hatch. It's so exciting to drive. You'll throw it in and out of bends, and the torque that you get from the engine, it'll just pull you out of bends. As for the noise the engine makes, have a listen to this. Oh yeah, I'll tell you, it sounds superb. It's like music to my ears. I have to give you another listen to that. Listen. Oh, it is so much fun to drive this car. It's everything you need in a sporty car. And when you get up to 3rd and 4th gear, well, that torque is still there, amazingly enough. It's got everything, this machine. It'll put a smile on your face. I've even forgotten how naff it looks, being honest with you. Now, Renault have revised the steering and the suspension on this compared to the 172. But seeing as the 172 was a great car and great to handle, you won't probably feel any difference unless you get this car out on a racing track. To be honest, that's where it should be. And what's also quite amazing is this car costs under 13 grand. The last time I was in a car and had a smile on my face like that, well, actually I better not tell you. Next up then, we have the MG ZR160.
Although the MG is 14 horsepower less than the Renault, it still gets to 60 in 7.4 seconds, and it feels very quick out on the road, though it's nowhere near as urgent as the Renault. What it has got though is a great note from the VVC engine, and when you're revving it very hard, something that it's designed to do, it sounds great and really sporty. Although the MG is based on the Rover 25, the MG technicians have clearly done a fabulous job in transforming the ride of the car, as the little MG is genuinely exciting. Right from the off it feels firm and responsive, and though it's not the most refined drive, it is certainly entertaining. As with most high-powered front-wheel drive cars, there is a degree of understeer when cornering under power, but lift off and the car will tuck back in like the best of them. Now, out on the track and in the hands of an experienced high-speed driver, I'm sure the Clio will be the better performing car. But to be honest, here on these lovely country roads, other than the power, the MG doesn't feel that much different to drive. It's not as pin-sharp or as aggressive as the Clio Cup, but this is still most definitely a car to put a smile on your face. Well done, MG Rover. And so to the Mini Cooper S. Now, whilst the car may look very different to the Minis of old, this is the closest car about 3 that gives you that go-kart-like feeling when you drive it hard. The chassis is firm and solid without being harsh, and the fact that the 4 wheels are as far into the corners of the car as you can get them means there's hardly any body roll. For such a firm ride, and for the smallest car here, the level of comfort is very impressive behind the wheel. And BMW's engineers have clearly worked wonders to provide that compromise between comfort and sporting performance. Now, although all 3 of our cars have power steering, the Mini system actually changes the sensitivity of the wheel, so that at high speed the steering is more sensitive and you can really feel the difference when you are driving the car hard. However, the Mini setup is such that you don't have to drive it as hard as the other 2 cars to get the same level of excitement. Even a quick jaunt down to the shops will raise a smile. It's a tough one here, but overall we've given the Cooper S the highest marks, as it will probably give the majority of drivers the most enjoyment. However, the drivers who know how to get the best from a car will rate the Clio every time, as it's the closest to a track day car of the 3. And the MG isn't that far behind, with a great chassis setup and superb engine.
Right, time to calm down and unfortunately get sensible. Let's see which one of our hot hatches rates the best for value for money. First up, it's the Renault Clio Cup, and at just under £13,000 is the cheapest of our 3 cars here today. Voila! And if you look at the performance figures, well, it's probably the cheapest sub 7 seconds to 60 car available on the market. Now, it doesn't come with as much kit as the other 2 cars, but it is a specialist model, which means it should hold its value really well. Next up, it's the MG ZR160, and at £14,500, it's actually the same price as the Mini Cooper S. And although it is a cracking looking car, and I can tell you one thing, it's a bundle of fun to drive, you would expect a better interior for the money, especially when you compare it to the cheaper Clios. The amount of kit you get isn't the best, there's no traction control, and you don't get any passenger or side airbags. And finally, onto the little Mini. And depreciation just isn't a word you would use with this car. Although its list price is the same as the MG at £14,500, it's not unusual to see nearly new Minis going for slightly more than their showroom price because people are just so eager to jump the waiting list. At the pumps, well, thanks to its supercharger engine, it's actually the thirstiest of our three cars here today, returning around 33.6 miles to the gallon. But on the plus side, it is the cheapest to insure at Group 15.
Although all of the three cars offer superb performance, the Mini gets the highest marks for value here, as it already enjoys cult car status, has class-leading quality, yet it can still cut it with the big boys in the performance stakes. Next up, it's the Renault, because as we've already said, it handles like a track car and it's one of the cheapest cars you can buy that will get you to 60 in under 7 seconds. Least marks goes to the MG, as its great looks and performance can't hide the poor interior and their miserable equipment list.
Well, that's nearly it from Carfile for this week, unfortunately, because I've had a lot of fun today driving these cars. But before we go, let's see how the scores added up.
A very close call this week, but in the end, it's the Mini Cooper S that scores the highest. It looks great, it's got BMW build quality, and it gives great performance out on the road. But whether you've just passed your test or are looking for a car to enjoy your retirement in, any of these three will give you something to smile about.
Well, that's it from Carfile for this week. I hope you enjoyed the show as much as I did. But make sure you join us next week when we have Chapter 2 in our Hot Hat saga. I'll be testing the Honda Civic Type R, the Leon Cupra R, and the Golf R32. Yes, they are the more mature hot hatches. We'll see you then. Have a good one. Bye.